Okay, today I want to discuss one of the more controversial food supplements available on the sport supplement market. If I use an expression, some of you might recognize this, and you'll guess what I'm going to talk about. Feels like DECA. Feels like DECA. I'll explain that in a minute, but the reference to DECA is to the anabolic injectable steroid DECA-durabolin. So I'll explain the statement, how it came about, but what I'm discussing here is beta-hydroxy beta-methyl butyrate, better known as HMB. What is HMB? HMB is a metabolite of the branched chain amino acid leucine. There's 3 branched chain amino acids: leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Of the 3, leucine is by far the most potent promoter of muscle protein synthesis. In fact, leucine is the key to increase muscle protein synthesis, which is in turn the cornerstone of muscular hypertrophy. The recommended dose of leucine is 2.5 grams for the average person involved in weight training, 2.5 grams per meal or per protein meal. And recent studies show that men and women over 40 who are in a state of what they call anabolic resistance, which entails a resistance to the uptake of amino acids for use in muscle protein synthesis. They found that if you ingest up to 4 grams of leucine, you overcome anabolic resistance. So, in other words, the bottom line, if you're older, you could take in up to 4 grams of leucine. Don't go crazy with this. Any more than 4 grams doesn't do a thing. So 4 grams is about the maximum amount for somebody over 40. Now, what does this have to do with HMB? Well, HMB is a metabolite of leucine. What happens in the body is leucine, about 5% of ingested leucine is converted first into a substance called ketoisocapriate, or KIC, which itself was once available as a food supplement. Didn't work very well, so it didn't really gain much popularity. And then KIC is converted further into HMB. Your body actually produces, depending on how much leucine you ingest, your body will produce anywhere from 250 milligrams to a gram a day naturally of HMB, which means that HMB is not an essential nutrient because it can be produced in the body. Now, the way it works, what they've discovered, generally speaking, is, as I say, leucine is the key amino acid for promoting muscle protein synthesis. But it turns out that the studies show that HMB is kind of like the other side of the coin, so to speak, in that it tends to favor anti-catabolic effects in muscle. And you have to understand, muscle growth comes about because of 2 processes: increased anabolic effects of muscle, such as increased muscle protein synthesis, and the other thing is decreased muscle breakdown, which would be anti-catabolic effect. When you combine the 2, you have increased muscle size and strength. So anti-catabolic effects are very important. The problem is they don't show up, they're not quite as potent as, let's say, the anabolic effects. And you'll see how this relates to HMB in a minute. But the point to remember is that the studies show that HMB is 20 times more potent than leucine in promoting anti-catabolic effects in muscle. So, and the way it works, if you depend on leucine for your intake of HMB, you're going to have a lot of leucine, because 60 grams of leucine converts to only 1 gram of HMB in the body. So, depending on leucine as a source of HMB is not the best thing. Now, let's talk a little bit about this feels like DECA thing. First of all, a lot of people don't realize that HMB is not a new substance. It was actually first synthesized way back in 1877, but it wasn't. It was also, there was some studies in the 1940s done out, but nobody really recognized its effects on how it might, let's say, promote muscle gains until the early 90s, when researchers at the University of Iowa, a guy named Steve Nielsen, was doing experiments with cattle. It was basically a veterinary experiments and he gave them HMB, which was a very, very obscure substance. And he noticed that the cattle seemed to increase the lean mass content of cattle. So based on this, he decided to embark on a couple of experiments with humans. So he basically, over the next couple of years, published some studies in medical journals involving untrained human subjects. He gave them about 3 grams of HMB a day, and most of the studies showed muscle gains from the HMB compared to people that took a placebo. Those who took the HMB showed increases in strength and some increases in muscle size. These were untrained individuals, however, and untrained individuals usually respond automatically. In other words, as soon as you lift weights, you always make some gains in muscle size and strength. However, the placebo group was also untrained, and the HMB group did show superior results, indicating HMB was in fact doing something. Now, I'd say in the late 90s, in fact, I'll tell you what it was. The February 1996 issue of a popular bodybuilding magazine called Muscle Media 2000 was published by a guy named Bill Phillips. Now, Bill had a very sterling reputation as a paragon of honesty when it came to talking about supplements. Before he had Muscle Media 2000, he started out with a small newsletter, which I actually got myself. And in the newsletter, he would actually take steroids. He'd get steroids on the black market and analyze them and tell you which ones were real and which ones were fake. And this earned him a very popular reputation for honesty. So, of course, then he wound up, it's a long, I don't want to go into the history of Bill Phillips, but to make a long story short, he was first involved in the production of a food supplement called Metrix, and then he purchased the EAS company. And in February 1996, in a column in the Muscle Media 2000 written by Dan Duchesne, also known as the Steroid Guru, Dan described a note he had received from Bill Phillips, in which Phillips was talking about his experience ingesting HMB, and he used the expression "feels like DECA." That's how it all started. And this was in the magazine. And remember, Bill Phillips had a sterling reputation for honesty, and people said, "Well, wait a minute. If Bill Phillips says this stuff works like DECA Durabolin, an anabolic steroid, this must be great stuff." And this basically launched HMB. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out as expected. To make a long story short, most of the studies with untrained subjects were sponsored by the companies that held a use patent for HMB. In other words, most of them were not independent studies. They were studies sponsored by people that stood to gain from the sale of HMB. And, you know, these kind of studies can easily be manipulated. And let me add the proviso, I'm not saying that these studies were fake or wrong. It's just that, you know, you have to take these studies with a grain of salt, because there was an ulterior motive involved, which is profit. In other words, the companies that sponsored these studies stood to make a lot of money from the sale of HMB. Now, to make without going into each and every study of HMB over the years, I can tell you that the sum total of the studies are that they work for certain people, and I'll describe who HMB actually will help in a second. But the important point to remember is HMB tends to be much less effective in those with training experience. In those advanced trainees, HMB doesn't really work anything like DECA, and this greatly tarnished the reputation of Bill Phillips. But in his defense, subsequent studies, which I'll talk about in a minute, have showed that he wasn't really off the mark when he said it works like DECA. He should have been more specific. A proper statement would have been, it provides the anti-catabolic effects that are similar to DECA, Durabolin, or other anabolic steroids, but it doesn't provide the anabolic effects. Of course, if he had said that, it would have reduced his sales, since he was already selling HMB, so he left that part out. But he wasn't really lying. So, and I'll tell you, there's a newer form of HMB on the market that's also very expensive, as is HMB itself. The original form of HMB was a calcium salt version. The newer form is called the free acid version, and the features are that it gets in the blood a lot faster than the, let's say, tableted or calcium salt version of HMB, and you get a greater blood level of the free acid. Supposedly this makes it more potent and provides anti-catabolic effects. However, I wrote about a study about maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where they compared the free acid. This is right after the free acid was produced. It wasn't on the commercial market yet. They compared the free acid form of HMB with the old-fashioned tablet calcium salt, and the old-fashioned calcium salt tablet proved superior for promoting anti-catabolic effects in muscle. This is something that you'll never see in the ads for the free acid. I'm not saying the free acid is junk, but I think it's questionable. I don't think it's that great. Apparently it might last a little bit longer in the blood than the tablet, although the study I wrote about, the tablet proved superior because it actually lasted a lot longer. The free HMB, the free acid, was metabolized a lot quicker than the tablet. So anyway, what is the suggested dose of HMB? The suggested dose is 3 grams a day. They've tried 6 grams, 9 grams. There was no difference. So taking more HMB, the old idea if 3 pills work, then 6 will work, would be a waste of money with HMB. The best way to take it is 1 gram 3 times a day. Don't take 3 grams at once. You won't get any side effects. It just doesn't work as well. 3 grams, as with most nutrients, will be metabolized a lot faster than 1 gram, so you won't get as much benefit. So if you decide to try it. Now, okay, let's talk about, I mentioned earlier that HMB is effective for certain people. Now, I'm going to tell you specifically who HMB might actually work for. If you are not in this category, let me give you a flat statement. Don't waste your money on HMB. It will do absolutely nothing for you, except maybe it will help to lower what they call low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is associated with heart disease. There's a lot easier ways to do that, like doing aerobics exercise, which doesn't cost anything. So I should also mention HMB seems to have some slight effects on helping you reduce body fat, but some studies show it does have this effect. Other studies show it doesn't. So the fat reduction effect is kind of up in the air right now. Nobody really knows. In fact, one study actually showed it caused you to gain body fat, but that was just one study. HMB, I'll talk about how it works in a second, but one of the things it does is it increases what they call IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, in muscle. Intramuscular IGF-1 is, in fact, probably the most anabolic hormone that exists as far as increasing muscle size. In doing so, HMB promotes the activity of what they call myoblasts, which are progenitor cells or pre-muscle cells. It also helps increase the efficiency of what they call satellite cells, which are muscle stem cells, which are involved in the repair and building of muscle tissue. So again, this relates more to an anti-catabolic effect than an anabolic effect, although these processes do have an overlapping anabolic effect. Now, okay, let's talk about who HMB might actually help. The first group of people is, as the study showed, which was sponsored by the HMB purveyors, it will definitely help beginners. Untrained subjects tend to break down muscle tissue. Their muscles aren't used to exercise, so if they take HMB, it will probably provide an additional anti-catabolic effect and will help them gain some muscle. So beginners, untrained subjects, probably HMB will help, and the studies did show that. Again, untrained subjects. The other, another group of people that would likely be helped by HMB are older people who are in the process of losing muscle, a condition known as sarcopenia. A lot of these people don't work out. If you don't work out as you get older, your muscles are going to melt like butter past the age of 50. By the time you're 80, you can lose 40% of your muscle mass, which will mean that you can't even move, you can't dress, feed yourself, you wind up in a nursing home. HMB is, because of its anti-catabolic effects, has been shown in several studies to be quite useful for older people in a state of sarcopenia or muscle loss. So HMB could be a very useful supplement for them. Another group that HMB might help, let's say you are an advanced person, right? And you're starting a completely different training program, different exercises, different rep schemes. Let's say you're going from low reps to very high reps. In a situation like that, you're breaking down an unusual amount of muscle tissue. Because of that, adding some 3 grams of HMB a day might help you recuperate better, and again will provide an anti-catabolic effect. I should add, if you're taking anabolic steroids, you're adding HMB to it will do absolutely nothing. Don't bother if you're taking anabolic steroids, because anabolic steroids, you won't even notice any effect with HMB. The other thing that let's say, and I wrote about this in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, I did a huge definitive article on how to prepare for a natural bodybuilding competition. Of course, natural indicates somebody who's not using any type of anabolic drug or any drugs related to bodybuilding. In the article, I suggested in the latter stages of a diet for a natural bodybuilder, when you've reduced much of your body fat, there's a much greater chance of losing lean mass. In this situation, adding 3 grams a day of HMB will probably have a very high likelihood of helping you to spare muscle tissue towards the end of the diet, so you don't lose muscle, let's say, in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the diet. So it can be very useful for a natural trainee. And of course, under conditions of extreme muscle loss besides aging, such as the cachexia or loss of muscle mass that occurs in diseases such as cancer or AIDS, HMB will likely be of use there. Why does it work for these things? Because recently, only about 2 years ago, they discovered that HMB blunts the primary catabolic pathways in muscle. It has to do with what they call a ubiquitin pathway. HMB is very potent at blunting the effects of muscle protein breakdown by inhibiting this pathway. Years ago when HMB first came out, they thought the mechanism involved HMB promoting cholesterol deposition in muscle membranes, and it is involved in cholesterol metabolism, but that's not the main mechanism. They now know it works by, again, increasing IGF-1 in muscle and also by blunting muscle catabolic pathways. And it's very potent in that respect. Let's see. As far as muscle power goes, in other words, muscle power and strength, studies show that, again, mostly with the untrained trainees, HMB seems to increase strength about maybe 2 to 3%. Which isn't that bad, really. I mean, but that's untrained trainees. There's some studies show that taking HMB, because of its anti-catabolic effects, it shows a decreased excretion of muscle protein breakdown products like creatine kinase. However, the preponderance of studies on HMB show almost no effect on muscle soreness. If you want something that might help muscle soreness, look to fish oil. Recent studies show that fish oil does help, as does vitamin C. Again, when it comes to leucine, HMB is definitely in second place for increasing muscle protein synthesis. The studies show that HMB increases muscle protein synthesis about 70%, whereas leucine increases it 110%. So leucine is quite superior in terms of muscle protein synthesis. There was an interesting study that compared ingesting 3 grams a day of HMB. They compared it to the loading phase of creatine, which involved ingesting 20 grams of creatine a day for 7 days, followed by a 10 gram a day maintenance phase for about 2 months. And they found that the creatine was 3 times more effective for promoting gains in lean mass compared to HMB. So this is the kind of stuff that makes people think twice about HMB, because it's not an inexpensive substance. And the good news about HMB is that thus far the toxicity study showed that it's safe for long-term use. It's not going to cause any side effects that are known at this time. So keep in mind, if you want to, the thing to take away from this video is if you want to consider using HMB, great for untrained people, great if you're an advanced trainee who's changing to a new type of training program or using an increased level of intensity, good for older people losing money. Well, you will lose money if you're not in these categories and you buy HMB, but good for older people losing muscle, I should say, or people that are very ill in a state of catabolism, like cancer patients and AIDS. For the average advanced trainee who's training hard but not doing anything specific, HMB probably will do very little, so don't bother. If you want information on substances like HMB and many other substances, creatine, ergogenic aids, food supplements, anti-aging, hormonal therapy, fat loss research, I strongly suggest you subscribe to my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter, more like an ebook, 40 to 50 pages every month, no ads, no BS, pure fact, very definitive articles. Every article will tell you everything you need to know about anything I write about. There will be no questions after you read my articles. It's written in simple English. Any technical terms are explained. I guarantee no matter what your level of expertise, you will learn by reading my newsletter, because quite honestly, I myself learn in just doing the research for these articles. I always learn something myself. So subscribe today, www.appliedmetabolics.com. Thank you for listening. And for those of you that want a good friend, I'm going to say it again. You didn't hear the barking in this video. They were quiet. Get yourself a dog. Go to a shelter. Get a dog. My God, they're so loyal. They're the best friends you could possibly have. I've had dogs now for about 15, maybe 17 years. I can't imagine not having a dog now. I can't believe they're so loving. They're great. Best friends, most loyal friends you'll ever have. Take care.